Damilola had every intention of getting to bed early that Saturday night. It was a big Sunday, Bishop himself was going to preach, and she had even been assigned to lead the second praise song. She told herself, just small dinner, quick catch-up on laundry, and early bed. But as always, intention and execution were two distant cousins. First, she got caught up washing a mountain of clothes she had been dodging all week. Then, as she folded the last wrapper, her phone pinged. The church WhatsApp group was on fire. Gossip about Sister Ngozi's Gelly from last week had spiraled into full-blown analysis. Damilola laughed, typed that thing looked like DSTV dish please, and promised herself she'd sleep as soon as she was done replying. That's when she made the biggest mistake of the night. She opened Netflix. One episode became two. By the time she checked the time, it was 2:47 a.m. A loud "ha" escaped her lips. She jumped into bed, whispered a 2-minute "Lord forgive me, I will never do this again" prayer, and drifted off with her bonnet halfway off. By 6 a.m., her alarm sounded like a trumpet from heaven. She slapped it, turned over, and bargained with God, just 5 more minutes, Lord. You understand. Those 5 minutes became 30. She eventually rolled out of bed like a tired log of firewood and began a mad rush. She ironed her clothes in record time, did the fastest eyebrow brush of her life, and downed lukewarm tea while tying her shoelaces. Somehow, against all odds in church traffic, she arrived just as the opening prayer ended. And that's when her reward became her punishment. Because of her choir role, and the fact that she showed up looking serious with Bible, notebook, and tambourine, she was ushered straight to the front row. Not second row, not side row, but the front, directly across from Bishop's pulpit, like she came to monitor angels. As she sat down, she said to herself, "This seat is the best sit around here," and she smiled silently to herself, feeling proud. But little did she know, it was actually a trap. A front row trap waiting to disgrace her publicly. And thus began the countdown to Damilola's unforgettable Sunday fall. The service kicked off with the usual fervor. Praise and worship were lively, as always, and Damilola couldn't help but get lost in the rhythm. She shook her tambourine with the energy of someone who had just been given a golden ticket to heaven. Her voice even joined in with the choir in perfect harmony, at least, she thought it did. But by the time the offering was taken and the announcements wrapped up, she felt the first attack. It wasn't physical, no. It was a much more dangerous adversary, sleep. You see, the previous night had taken a toll. Her body, no matter how she tried to fight it, was demanding one thing: rest. Damilola blinked hard, glanced at her phone for the time, which only made it worse because now she was thinking about how long she had been awake, and then tried to focus on the sermon. Bishop had just opened his Bible, and he was going in with a deep introduction to his message. But then the war began. Her eyelids, once so light and eager to hear the word, began to feel like 2 heavy stones. She opened her Bible, but even the pages felt like weights. She highlighted verses that she didn't even remember writing down. She tried nodding along to what Bishop was saying, but it was more of a nodding off than any spiritual engagement. She squeezed her eyes tight, shook her head, and slapped her cheeks, hoping that would wake her up. No luck. The worst part? She couldn't even pretend to be caught up in the Holy Spirit anymore. The last time she raised her hands, she noticed the person beside her, Aunt Ngozi, had been side-eyeing her since she began doing her spiritual stretches in the middle of Bishop's sermon. So, Damilola did what any sensible person would do: she tried to sit up straighter. She opened her Bible again. She muttered, "Holy Spirit, keep me awake, keep me strong." But then the real killer came. The Nigerian church soundtrack, the loud reverberating sounds of the church's speakers blasting the bishop's voice through the air, began to feel like a lullaby. Her head nodded. And then, it happened. Her head didn't just tilt. It dropped. First slowly, then suddenly. Her body was like a slow-motion fall, as though in a bad dream. The heavy pull of gravity got the best of her, and just as she felt herself tipping over, her neck gave up, sending her whole body into a face-first freefall. With a wham, Damilola found herself flat on the cold church floor. It was as though time froze. The congregation went silent. Even the musicians stopped strumming. And there was Bishop, standing at the pulpit, mid-sermon, staring directly at the human disaster unfolding before him. For a brief moment, Damilola laid there on the floor, feeling like she was in one of those awkward moments you only see in movies. The kind where everything seems to pause, and you're just praying for the earth to swallow you whole. Her mind raced. How did I get here? What happened? Did I just fall in front of everyone? Why can't I move? She blinked, trying to gather her bearings, but all she could hear was the sharp intake of breath from the people around her, followed by the dead silence of the congregation. In her dazed state, Damilola could have sworn she heard a bird call out in the distance, but that was just her imagination. As if she wasn't embarrassed enough, the heavy sound of Bishop's chuckle sliced through the quiet, like a knife through butter. At first, it was subtle. Just a tiny gasp of air. But as Damilola remained on the floor, awkwardly trying to pretend like she was checking for a missing pen or something, the chuckle became louder. There was no hiding it now. Bishop was laughing. Damilola's face turned an alarming shade of red as she slowly pushed herself up, straightening her dress and pretending that the fall was all part of some new dance move or divine intervention. But the bishop, God bless his soul, wasn't having any of it. With a smile still playing on his lips, he cleared his throat and returned to the microphone. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice a little too high-pitched for a man of his stature. "Sometimes, even when the spirit is willing, the flesh is weak." The congregation erupted into laughter, some trying to stifle it, while others just let it out, loudly. At this point, Damilola's shame had reached its peak. She couldn't even raise her head. She remained bent down, frantically looking for her lost composure, all while her naughty imagination started constructing the worst of scenarios. She pictured a whole video going viral titled "Damilola's Fall," when sleep attacks the anointed. The worst part wasn't just the fall, though. It was the way everyone continued to chuckle. Bishop's chuckling seemed to infect the entire church, like a comedy virus. Even Auntie Ngozi, who had been side-eyeing her for what felt like hours, let out a slight chuckle. That laugh from her, in particular, made Damilola want to crawl into the nearest church basement and never be seen again. But Bishop? Bishop was a professional. He knew when to laugh, and when to maintain some semblance of dignity. He wiped his face, composed himself, and then nodded sagely at the congregation. Indeed, the Holy Spirit moves in mysterious ways. We are all human, and we must laugh at our own weaknesses. And just like that, Bishop resumed his preaching, but now, there was a clear smile in his eyes. He knew what he had done. He'd let loose a tiny miracle of humor in the middle of his sermon, and Damilola, though she was on the floor in her heart, had become the vessel of joy for that moment. Meanwhile, Damilola slowly pulled herself back up to her seat, each of her movements exaggerated as if she was trying to show that she was still a functioning human being, not an impromptu church comedy act. The rest of the service passed in a blur. Every time she looked up, she felt the weight of the congregation's eyes on her, as if everyone had secretly placed a bet on how long it would take for her to fall again. By the time the service finally drew to a close, Damilola was sure she had lived through her worst public moment ever. The church's exit was filled with a mix of giggles, laughter, and the occasional "Are you okay, dear?" from well-meaning church members. But behind their concern, she could see the twinkle in their eyes, the "I know what happened" kind of look. She avoided eye contact with anyone and tried to keep her head low. But the thing about being in a small Nigerian church is that there is no escaping the gossip. As she made her way out of the church, the older women who had seen everything whispered to one another, nudging each other with wide eyes. The younger ones giggled behind their hands. Even Auntie Ngozi, who usually saved her judgment for the choir members who couldn't carry a note, had a smirk on her face. But then, something unexpected happened. Bishop, the same man who had witnessed her fall from grace, walked over to her with a smile. For a second, Damilola's heart stopped. She thought he was going to chastise her, remind her about the importance of staying awake during the sermon, or maybe even make a joke at her expense. Instead, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and said, "Damilola, you are the real testimony today." Her brows furrowed in confusion. What in the world did he mean? He leaned in closer, his voice just above a whisper. "You made everyone laugh in the right way today. Do you know how important it is to remind people that life isn't all seriousness and struggle? You just let everyone know that even when we stumble, we can get back up and still have joy. God has a sense of humor, and he used you today." Damilola blinked, processing his words. She hadn't expected this at all. "You should be proud. You didn't just fall, you rose in a way that lightened the hearts of those around you." For the first time that day, Damilola smiled. Bishop had just given her a kind of blessing she wasn't prepared for. As she walked out of the church that day, she felt a strange sense of peace. Yes, she'd fallen. Yes, she had been the center of the church's amusement for the better part of an hour. But she had not let shame define her. When she got home, her mother immediately noticed the slight redness around her cheeks, an obvious sign that something had happened. But Damilola just shrugged and said, "Nothing happened, Mummy. Nothing at all." Her mother laughed and replied, "The whole church must have heard about your fall. I can't believe you fell in front of Bishop himself." "Nah wah. Don't worry, it's a blessing in disguise." But to Damilola's surprise, as the week went on, people in the church were kinder to her. There was no teasing. No mocking. In fact, she felt a sense of camaraderie. People actually started talking to her more openly, and the once awkward glances were replaced by warm smiles. It was as if, somehow, her embarrassing moment had lightened her reputation, and in the most unexpected of ways, she became more relatable. That Sunday, when the next service came, Damilola felt confident again. She arrived early, took her seat, and kept her eyes open. But as she sat there, she realized that she wasn't afraid to laugh at herself anymore. Maybe that fall wasn't a disaster after all. Maybe it was a lesson in humility, a lesson in accepting our flaws, and most importantly, a lesson in laughter. And just like that, Damilola had turned a moment of public failure into a private victory. After all, in a church full of serious, spiritual folk, sometimes the greatest blessing is knowing how to laugh at the absurdity of life.